I'm back once again, and this is kind of a continuation of the brake job that I've done on my son's 2008 Honda Accord LX. It's got the disc brakes all the way around, automatic transmission, excuse me, four-door sedan. Had done the front brakes and decided to go ahead and do the rear brakes at the same time. I'm glad I did, because I've already done the driver's side and discovered a problem. Video bomb. Discovered a problem on that other side, and that was the caliper boot kept sliding down. It would not stay in the groove. I'll be able to demonstrate this on this side once I get everything off. But that just meant that because the boot didn't go back and forth with the piston, that contamination could get on that piston surface and damage things. As I discovered on my driver's side front, the piston was actually jammed. It was seized because there was a tear in the boot. So I didn't want that to happen back here. And I'll go ahead, and things ought to go faster this time, because it's kind of slow on the other side. You know, how many bolts do I take out? Do I take this one out, take that one out, back and forth, back and forth? And so this will come a little bit easier, simply because I've already done the other side. Now I'm getting to lose some daylight, so some of this is probably going to be filmed at night. So now I am on the passenger side in the rear. So let me go get some tools, and I'll turn my lights on and see what we can see. Alright, let's go ahead and excuse me. Let's go ahead and look at some of the different components here. There are a few of these bolts I've already loosened up, because it's much easier to do that in the beginning than it is to do it later on, and you'll see why, especially on the caliper. So you know, here's the rear caliper. Here's the rear caliper bracket. Here's your banjo bolt, and that is for your brake fluid to go into the cylinder and the piston in there. If you follow this line up, now, pardon me, I'm going to have to lie on my back to do this. There is, let's see, right up in here. Hope I'm not making anybody dizzy. Let's get some lighting on it. You'll see a bolt. Let's get my light to stick somewhere. Here we go. Follow the brake line. This bolt holds the brake line in place. Again, there's your banjo bolt. I've loosened all this up. Now I've got to clamp this particular brake line off, so that when I start taking this banjo bolt loose, you're going to lose some of the brake fluid. There are the caliper bolts. Up top here is the bracket bolt. There's another one underneath. And go to this side. You've got to be careful on this side, because you have your ABS line you want to be very careful of right there. And because it's going to be a complete brake job, including calipers, bracket, you know, redo the boot, the seal, and the rotor, I'm going to be dismantling quite a bit. Now up under here, get some light. This will be self-evident once I get this caliper off. You also have where the emergency brake is. You have to get it from the other side. Alright, now if I can get some lighting there. Alright, right here is the bolt that holds the parking brake on, and that then attaches to the bottom on a lever of the actual caliper. Now that bolt, the bolt that holds the brake line on, I believe, are 12 millimeter. The caliper bolt was 12 millimeter. And let me show you on this particular style too, because your boots will spin around and around and around, you need a 17 millimeter. Get a nice close up. That's a 12, and that little boss right there, that's a 17 millimeter. It's a 14 millimeter for the brackets. Now the issue I found out, okay, I'm sorry, Here's the back side. That's the emergency brake. That's the back side of that. So the drawback about the caliper bolt is one of the caliper bolts, let me go underneath, is very, very close to another component. See if I can get a good shot of it here. Pardon me as I climb under the car. Now, if you can see, get the light hooked. Well, I will get to it. There we go. Now, one of those caliper bolts is right up in here. I'm not sure. Let's see. I'll turn the screen around so you can see that. Okay. So that caliper bolt, the bottom one, is, let me get the camera focused there, as to where I'm at, is right there. Right back in there. But what interferes is this particular bolt right here. It's on the bottom side of the control arm. So what happens is trying to get a socket, whether it be a long or short socket, in there to that caliper bolt doesn't work. And I tried the flexible socket even, and it just doesn't seem to work. I guess the way they designed it is you have to take part of the control arm off, lift this thing away from the car to get to that. Well, a box end wrench does just as well. So when it comes time to put that back and you want to torque it, you're just going to have to guesstimate. You can torque the upper one and get a good feel. But on this one, you just take a box end wrench and torque it. It ain't going anywhere. But it was a real pistol. Okay, so let me set the camera up onto my, I might be a little bright there. Set it up on my tripod, and I'll go ahead and start taking the caliper off. I'm going to go ahead and up here I've got some clamps and a rag, and I'll clamp off the brake line. And then I've also got for up here, when I need to suspend this, you don't want it pulling on the brake line and stuff, so I've got a bungee cord I'm going to probably have up here. So let me go get my hemostats, actually is what I have, and get that set up. Alright, so hopefully you can see the first part, the first task. I'm going to, let's see, I forgot my bungee cord, but I'll put it up there for now. I've already loosened this up, maybe a little bit more. That was a 12. That was a 14. I may have said 12, but that banjo bolt's a 14. Now, I've also taken the cap off of my master cylinder for the brake fluid. And let's say if it spins, you put your 17mm there. So, take that off. Okay. Alright, then slowly, if you have to, you can take a screwdriver in here and push these pads apart a little bit. But I think I've been able to get this piston off without that. Maybe so. Let's see. Of course, this part, watch me struggle. Alright, slides right off. Now, as you can see, I have these extra lines here, and if you try and undo those bolts, it's like, uh-oh, now I don't have any leverage. That's why I loosened those bolts up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew the banjo bolt first. Again, remember you're going to leak some fluid. Now there is a banjo bolt, a washer, the fitting, and another washer, which you have to replace. So if you lose a washer, no biggie. You don't have another set in the kit. know a banjo bolt because I'll show you it has a hole. Drip a little bit. Has a hole in it to allow the passage of the brake fluid. Popped out of the magnetic tray. Okay. So now when you remove it, it stays in place because it has a hook on it. And again, your washers are here and here, so make sure that you remove both those washers and use the new ones. I'll work on that in a minute. So now I have to work on getting this particular bolt off. You see it'll drain a little brake fluid. That's no biggie. This particular bolt has a washer on it, and two washers. One's a lock nut washer, so it doesn't vibrate loose. And then it slides right out of the mechanism. And here, it'll slide just like that. Alright, now, let me show you the difference here. Everywhere. Might help if I put my finger in the hole. Alright, I'll show you the difference in the piston. This particular piston isn't smooth like in the front. So you have to make sure that the grooves in the pads fit in that. And this thing's on a post. And here's a good thing I did this. Look at that tear. It's a huge tear in that boot. Let me get my flashlight. Would you say there's a tear? I would say so. That boot is probably original. It looks old. Looks very old. So, it goes without saying. Think of the contamination that gets in there. Yeah, it's a good thing I decided to do this. Alright, so let me put this over on the bench and I'll be right back. Now remember, those bracket bolts are pretty tight. So you say, Tom, how do I get those off? Well, it's great if you've got an impact wrench, which I have, and I've got the real small one, the little Astro. But like I said, that bolt on the bottom, I'm on the, you see my wrench, it's on the top one. On the bottom, you can't really get anything in there. Again, I'm dealing with stuff on the ground, not on a lift. So you can do the double wrench technique, which I'm always cautious of. You know, you can slide things down. Let me get over here again. And you can slide wrenches down like so and do this. You can use a cheater bar, or if you don't have a cheater bar, whoop, I'm getting a text. Five-pound engineer's hammer and tap it, and that broke it loose. Alright, so now I'll put that up out of the way. I've got to unscrew the wrench. Take the bracket off, and of course the pads are there, and we'll look at the pad wear and see what that's like. Long bolts. Still need to hire me a camera guy. Or, excuse me, camera person. You don't want your wife helping you do this stuff. That never works. It's like running electrical wiring. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you talking ugly to me? It doesn't work. Forget it. Don't do the girlfriends. Don't do the fiancés. Don't do the wives. Alright. So I'm going to slide that off. So I say. Okay. Let me come over to the camera. So, that's what it looks like. There's your pad still inside. Now remember, inboard is where your indicator, wear indicator goes. There's a little wear indicator. We'll see that much more closely when I get to, let's grab the light. When we get to the new pads, as the pads wear down, that little metal clip will hit the rotor and let you know. See, right there. Here's your pads. Now, please tell me, are these Honda pads? This was a car that we bought at the local dealership about 1.5 years ago. And I tried to look at these numbers, and I couldn't determine if it was Honda or aftermarket. There's a shim there. There's where your caliper pins go. Alright, so let's pull the pads out. These things don't want to come out. I do have all new hardware, and I'll clean these things up. Wow, this is a bear. Alright, give me a second. I'll be right back. I have to use some persuasion. Alright, I had to use a little bit of persuasion to get those pads off. Now, the wear indicator, I don't know if it snapped off when I took them out. They were very tight. But let's look at the wear here. The wear pattern on this is the outboard pad. Alright, so interestingly enough, the outboard pad has more wear than inboard. Usually inboard wears quicker, but in all actuality, the outboard. So it makes me wonder if I have stuck pins. You see, here's where the wear indicator should have been. I must have snapped it off. No, I'm sorry, over here. I must have snapped it off. So here's, remember the cross hatches in the end of the piston? That's what those are for. They'll fit in there in the cross hatches. And that was where the wear indicator is. No wear indicator on the outboard. Well, that is strange. So in most cases, 3 out of 4, I found that the actual wear on the inside was greater than that on the outside. There's your bracket. Now, of course, I'm going to clean this off. You can use some brake clean and clean all this off before you take it off, but just depends. You don't want to blow all this off with compressed air because you inhale all the particles. That's not good for you. So I'm going to be taking the rotor off next. Let's see, here's my banjo and here's my brake. And so the next thing is to take this rotor off. So let me go get the necessary things for that. So the next neat little tool that I have, Honda has this design where they put in Phillips head machine screw to keep the rotor in place. Sometimes those things get rusted in there. Well, I have picked up, take the proper bit, an impact screwdriver, like so. And I've already loosened these up, but I'm just going to demonstrate. So what you do is you find the proper bit, put it in there, turn it to the left till you feel the resistance, then pop it with a hammer. Usually a medium-sized ball peen works pretty well. but as you're pushing and turning, you pop it with the hammer, it forces it to the left. And as you can see, these things are already loose. These did not rust in. They've been known to rust in solid. So I'll just go ahead and take this rotor off. I went ahead and bought all new rotors. Nowadays, you know, I've got calipers and I can measure what's the minimum, what's the maximum. But after seeing 2 boots that actually had tears out of 4, that concerns me. And you know, some of these rotors cannot be resurfaced. My wife's Kia was that way. It cannot be resurfaced. You had to buy new ones. And depending on whether these are Nissin or Akebono, there's different thicknesses. Nissin, I believe, is thicker, and the Akebonos were thinner. So I elected, you know, I don't compromise. So for the cost, I went ahead and I got me some new rotors. There we go. I'm looking for any pitting or anything unusual. See all the dust in there. I don't see anything unusual. But now it's paperweight. So now, what I'll do now is I'll pull my hose up a little bit. See, I don't have anything dangling, so I don't have to worry about the weight and stretching that hose. I'm going to brake clean all this. I think that's pretty good lighting. Now, what I have to do here is I have to unscrew the piston. So there are tools you can get, loaner tools that you can get that fits it in here, and it's got little posts on it. You can put it on here and unscrew it. Or I've got my standard little, get it in the camera, I've got my standard little tool here, you know, pry bar kind of thing, or a long cabinet maker's standard screwdriver there. Long screwdriver. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into the grooves and just unscrew it. And buddy, this was tight. It should not be this tight. So you can, this thing's pretty beat up. Put it in the slot. Boy, look at that boot. That is just absolutely torn up there. Wow, incredibly tight. Well, they tell me Honda seals don't leak very often. Pretty rare. But this is the dust boot. Seals aren't exposed to the atmosphere and dirt and grime like this. But this one has seen better days. Well, this is where that tool might have been a little more on the handy side. Let's see if I can get my... That's going to flex the screwdriver a bit much. Wow, like I said, this was beat up like one of the others. Right in here, it's been flattened out. I had to take my Dremel tool and flatten that out. So let me move my light a little bit there. Move it up here. I'll have to work out it from this end. Remember what I said about watch me struggle? I'm serious, this thing is very, very tight. Wow. Let's get a little bit better. There we go. Now, the piston will pop out now. Yep, there we go. So the piston popped out. Let's take a look there. I don't see any exceptional scoring anything. See, there's your post, there's your threads. A little dirty in the groove here. Now this is where the boot is supposed to fit in the groove. And, you know, as the piston moves back and forth, so does the boot. Alright, so that, let's take this old boot out here. Wow. And it has a groove that it has to fit into also. Now when I start putting this back together, you'll see what I mean. I got on the web, did some research, a little help from my friend on Just Answer, Hondaman, HONDA-MAN on justanswer.com. I go to him for a lot of questions. Been using him for quite a few years. He's a good guy. You always get the right answer from him. He did a little research. I did a little research about how to put the boot back in, because the new boot is obviously going to be smaller than the diameter of the piston. So it'll slide up and down. It'll be lubricated. So how do you get your fingers in here and all this closed space in order to spread that out evenly and get this piston back in? Well, I've seen 3 different methodologies, and one guy actually, you know, lubed up his fingers, everything's lubed up, and he tries to spread it around. You got to have some good finger strength there. Unfortunately, with arthritis, I don't have that finger strength, and I tried it. I mean, I tried it for an hour one day, tried it for an hour another day. If you heard the cursing in the stratosphere, that was me. So I did find an alternative method. I saw one on YouTube that utilized some wires. I made a modification so it wouldn't tear the boot. I'd already torn one boot on the other side by using my pick, and yep, I punctured it. So I'm now waiting on an extra kit. And then I saw another one. If you've ever put a piston into an automobile engine with its rings on, you know you have to use a sleeve. So this is a modification of something that was on the web that Hondaman sent me, and it's I'll make a video on that, and we'll see which is easier, the first method with the wires that I used, or the second method with a modified sleeve. And in this modified sleeve is something that almost everyone has. So piston doesn't look too bad. I'll put it over here. This boot, it's toast. I mean, look at this. I would say that was rather religious. It's holy. So that's about what the front boot looked like on my driver's side when I first started. Oh my gosh, here's two evenly. Here's a tear there, and there's a tear there. So this thing is junk. Now I'm going to look inside. Oh man, there's all kinds of trash in here. Oh, this is full of trash. Alright, so let's see if I can get a good angle on the camera. If not, I have a nifty little fiber optic, and I'm going to do that too. A nifty little fiber optic that I can poke down in here, and you can actually see what's going on. So let's do the camera first. This thing's full of trash. Oop, got to turn that around so I can see. Back it up a little bit. Let's see if I can get the flashlight. There we go. Now, look at the trash in there. Let's focus a little bit. Absolutely full of junk. That's not so good. I'm glad I did this brake job. Wow, look at that crap. That's unbelievable. Alright, so let me take this out. I'm going to clean it up. Oh, before I clean it up, I'm going to use my fiber optic and get a close-up shot. So I'll be back again. Alright, piston's out, boot is off. Now I got to take the seal out, and it's in a groove below everything. Way down here, where my pick is pointing to, is the seal. So it's right on that seal. It is a square cut seal. So I'm going to very carefully take my pick and work around that. If I can keep the light on there so that you can see it. And pull that out. Alright, so what do I mean by square cut? Well, if you look, it's a bit on the square side. So what I'm going to do, I cleaned it out a little bit. I've got a Dremel tool with one of those little brushes. I cleaned out a lot of this. Got rid of some of the dirt. I'm going to go in here and clean it some more. And get all the crap out of here with a pick and maybe a small screwdriver. And get all of this crap out of here. Make sure this is absolutely pristine. I did find a little corrosion on this one side, but I got a Q-tip and was able to get that out. And I used a little compressed air too, because man, there's, like I say, junk everywhere. So let's see, where'd I leave off? Alright, cleaned up the piston, cleaned up the inside of the caliper. There was one scratch in this piston right about here, but I'm not going to worry about it. It's high up, it's not down here. So I think it's in pretty good shape. I did grind down this little area in here, you know, where it was mangled a bit. Alright, here's the kit, and this is just for one side only. I had to get two kits. So in the kit you get a square cut seal. You get the dust boot for the piston. This is for the piston. Here are the two boots for the caliper pins. Here are the two bolts for the banjo bolt. And you get 3 packets of grease. Now, this reddish pinkish one says location, dust cover of caliper, cup of master cylinder. Then the orange one says pin moving portion. The clear one is all in Japanese. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't say where to apply it. Have done a lot of research. Was just online with the guy that I speak to on JustAnswer.com, Honda-Man. We researched and researched and researched. And so the only thing we could find, it really doesn't say anything in the manual. What we could determine was maybe this is for the square cut seal. And this will be, again, for the caliper pins. And this is going to be the inside wall. And then brake fluid, it does say in the parts list, brake fluid here. How interesting. Again, I need to... Bill Bell, where are you when I need you? He's a friend of mine from back in high school in the 70s when we were in Japan. He is Japanese American. He could probably read this for me. Gee, if you're on Facebook, look me up, Bill. That's interesting. So, we'll give it a shot. I've seen people use lots of different types of grease, but this came from the kit, and that's what I'm going to use. So what I did is I took a long Q-tip, where is it? And I put some of that pinkish reddish grease on there. Let's see. Get it in the frame, Tom. There we go. I took a long Q-tip. Any Q-tip will do, but this long one helps. And I spread that reddish pinkish grease up to the point where the actual square cut seal is going to fit. Now I'm going to put the square cut seal in, and I use that clear lube. You get it into the groove there. Side to side there, you can see it in the groove. Then I'm going to apply some of this pink grease to the boot, the outer dust boot for the caliper. A liberal coating. Especially on the inside there, because that piston is going to have to slide through there. Make sure I have plenty on there. Now, if you remember, this part of the groove here is going to go down. The boot will expand upward. Let's put the camera up a little bit more. You run your thumb along the edge, you should feel it grip inside. Of course, while doing this on camera, nothing works quite like the way it should. Okay, I think that's good. Let me check something. Alrighty, I'm going to give this my best shot. Now, you know, I've had issues trying to hold that boot up and get that piston in at the same time. So, I started thinking, and as you can see, I have 4 wires here. 1, 2, 3, and 1 in the back. And basically, what that is 12-2 electrical wire. I had some spare lying around. So I took the white and the black, 12-2, it's kind of weird, it's really 3, but 12-2 means 12 gauge and 2 conductor and a ground. Well, I'm not going to use the ground because it doesn't have a sheath, whereas the black and white conductors have a sheath. 14 gauge I didn't attempt. I figured that might be a little too flimsy, but it might work. But I had the 12-2, so I'm going to go ahead and use the 12-2. Well, how do I keep that copper wire from actually puncturing the boot? Well, what I did is, as you can see, this does have a tendency to stick out a little bit. So I took a pair of needle nose pliers, I pulled this end up, gave myself at least a 1/4 inch of sheath, as you can see on this one. See, I pulled it, and then on this end I have a protective sheath when I bend it over, because that wire is actually now down here. So I bent this over a little bit. I'll show you. So here's the end of the wire. If you look at the flat part here, where my thumbnail is, there's the end that will protect the boot. And I took my needle nose, well, actually a little more than I thought. Okay, took my needle nose. I'll cut off a little bit here just to show you. Okay, makes it nice and smooth. And I just bent it a little bit. Made myself a little bit of a hook out of it. And that's what I use to actually grab each of these 4 corners. And now that way I won't puncture the boot as long as I'm careful. So now I've got to lube up the piston and then take something else and get these, you know, I've got 4 corners, so I've got to get it in there and start pulling these corners as I insert the piston. So I have something for that. I'll be right back. Let me back this off a little bit and I'll show you ideas that I came up with. I went through Walmart yesterday and I thought about, you know, the wire. Well, how am I going to get this pulled back, this pulled back, this pulled back, and get the piston in? Well, I thought about crochet needles. But you'd have to be very careful because it does have a bit of a hook there. And I thought, well, I'd have to file that down. There was a possibility. Then, over there in the section where you have all the hobbies, they have a 5-pallet knife set. And I thought, now that's pretty neat. These are all plastic. And if I lube those up with a little bit of brake fluid, I could push that around and probably get that piston in there. And then I looked and found this one. This one's actually metal. And it has a little flexibility. So if I lube that up, I can probably stick that in there and swing it left and right and get that in there. And it's also angled, which means I can do this and it's going to be angled this way and this way, you know, away from it. And I can get that in there very delicately. So I think I'm going to try the metal one. It's only a few bucks. As you can see, it's got a little bit of flexibility to it, and I can get it in there. I'll give it a shot. Get my arm out of the way. If I can get it on the piston, I can slide up and down the piston. Now I'm going to lube it up with brake fluid, of course. I don't want to scratch anything. I'm going to go ahead and put the piston in there, and we'll see if this works. I've already lubed the piston up. Put some grease. I think I'll put some more grease on it just to make it extra slick. A little more brake fluid. I'm going to set it right down in there. And let's see if I can that there. Push it to the side. Okay, I got one side there. Slide it down. Push it to the side. Oops. Well, it was a thought. Let's get on this back side. Again, this will fit down and guide itself along those wires. I have a little trouble seeing there. Okay, so I'm going to push that way. This way. I'll slide it over. I may not get it on the first time. So you watch me struggle here. Alright, I got a little bit of a tilt towards you, toward the camera. I'm going to get up under here. A little bit of a tilt there. Get up under here. Maybe push this piston down. Take that little knife out, and there we go. I'll remove one wire at a time. Be very careful trying not to nick the boot. Slide it up. Okay, now I believe I have it. So now I'm going to take my tool, and I'm going to use a screwdriver. Well, here's my tool, and screw the piston back down, and then it's going to come up to here. I'm going to put a little more brake fluid on it. It's going to come up to here, and that top part of the boot will actually meet the groove. So very carefully get this threaded. Okay, let's move it very smoothly. Down we go. There's this mosquito in the garage with me, hogging my camera time. Okay, there we go. You might have heard that, but it kind of popped into place. Let's go down a little further. Go. So now I'm going to back it out and see if everything stays in place. It does help it if you have a vise too. And so far these look pretty good. Didn't want to use that pick because I punctured that first seal. Yeah, things look pretty good. And the boot is staying up. And as far as I want to take the piston, it remains sealed down at the bottom. Okay, don't want to back it out too far, then it's going to pull everything apart. Okay, so I don't see any punctures. I'm going to take my flashlight here in a second. That's probably about as far as I will take that piston, because by the time I put the pads in, okay, so I think I solved the problem. That took me a lot less time. Alright, let's take this light. Let's look around. It's sealed there. It's sealed there. I'm going to take this wire and just kind of lift up, since it's a smooth surface. Alright, let me find something smooth and I'm going to make double sure. Let's get a close-up there. Now, as you can see, it's right down in here is where I was having the issue with that part of the boot, which had a lip on it to stay inside there. As you can see, that's the bellows, and as the piston travels up, that bellows will stretch. It also stays in this groove here too. That's why I went ahead and decided to go ahead and change this out. When I would take the piston and increase the distance from here to here, that boot would remain down here, which means that's just contamination. So again, you know, that was with the whole mechanism out of the car, but I wouldn't be able to tell once I put it back on the car how much of that would be exposed. All I know was it was boggy, it was soft, and it would not stay in the groove here. That I did not like at all. So I think I've made that much easier, and I will examine one more time. I don't think I've got any punctures. Now I'm going to take the pins out. Now, in this case, some of these pins, some have flutes or flat edges, and some have just a round pin. Sorry for that interruption. The wife just pulled up from work. Okay, so what was I talking about? Ah, the pins. Now this is the upper side, and depending on the model and the make, sometimes the pins have flat sides to them, or fluting. Sometimes they have a band on them, and sometimes they're just round. Now, again, I was talking to on these rear brakes, and I was talking to a Honda man. Some models on these particular pads had this return spring that kind of fits in there. This model does not. And for the pads that do not have the return springs, the fluted, or I think they call it pin A, goes on top. On the bottom would be the round pin in this model. And again, there are some that have a round pin with an actual band around it. So let's pull this apart and see how they did that. But according to the service bulletin he sent me, this should be fluted. Now look, oh gosh, look how old this one is. Let's take this light. See, these boots are just shot. Look at all the grime. There's a tear. Turn it around a little bit. There's a tear right here. Zoom in a little bit. But right here, it's hard to see and maybe on the camera, but there's a tear right here on top. Let's pull these off. And there's a tear at the bottom too. Now, that one, yep, so this one is correct. Let me pull this boot rest away off. Of course the kit has new boots. See, there is a large tear there. Down here there was another one. So if you look closely, get it in the light, still not quite clean enough. There is a flat side here, flat side there, flat side there, 3 flat sides. Alright, so that will be the top pin. I think there was some premature wear. I think it was reading, and there was a TSB on some premature wear if you put it the other way. So again, my pads do not have the return spring, so this one goes on top. Let's look at the bottom one. Back the camera up a little. There we go. Alright, now this boot's in better shape. This just aged. These are probably original. This is a 2008, so this car was manufactured in like 2007. This boot's in slightly better shape. But by the time you pull it off, it's history. Alright, so this one is round all the way around. Oops. You look. No flat edges. So that'll be on the bottom. Now I will also, you have your brake hardware here. That needs to be changed every time too. So in this particular slot here, let me get a better camera angle. So here's the guide. It's the bottom guide. Again, that comes in a kit. Here's the top guide. Yep, they've seen better days. Pretty dirty, and those pads were not moving in these things at all. So I will take this, see if I can look inside here. And that's a strong magnet. Yeah, there's lots of old grease in there. So I'm going to go clean this out, some brake clean and compressed air. You know, I forgot to mention one thing too. Where this where this caliper will actually fit in, let me get this correct orientation. So where this caliper fits in, okay, so that'll be the top. On the back side of the caliper and those bolts, what'll happen is there are these washers. Don't forget, those may pop out on you, but they go between the area where the hub area is and right in there. And they have a little bit of tension on them, so it does help. But don't forget those. If they drops out, that's where that comes from. So I'm going to clean it up with the Dremel tool also. Attention to detail here. So I'm back at the car, and I had actually got ahead of myself and put the rotor back on. But you have to remember, there are these two, I cleaned these up, these two washers that fit here and here, and you have to put those in, then you put your rotor on, then you put your bracket on. So you have to make sure that you put these in first, and vice versa. When you take this off, make sure that they don't drop on the ground, because the actual bracket will slide in like so, and that's all going to be on the back side of the rotor, so it's hard to see. Now this has some little tabs on it, but that's kind of loose, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dab of grease, and I could bend the tabs out too, but I don't want to break anything, so I think I'll put a little dab of grease on the back side here, and it'll also prevent some corrosion. Stick that in. A little bit of that leftover grease from doing the caliper. And that will keep it in place. Now mind, you know, you have your two holes for the two Phillips head screws, so make sure you put one on where the lug nut is and one where you can put the actual screw back in. I cleaned this off with some brake clean, both sides. Some of these have Cosmoline to keep it from rusting. As I understand, there are a new style that are a polymer. I don't think you're going to use any brake clean on that. And just tighten it up. Doesn't have to be manhandled, just enough to one oomph. There we go. Put some fluid film on those threads just so they don't corrode. The only place I'm not going to use the fluid film is on the banjo bolt for the brake hose, simply because that's where fluid passes through. It has that hole in it. So now I'm going to go back to the bench and I'm going to go ahead and put the hardware into the bracket. Now the bracket will fit in this way, and again make sure on the back side that the actual little clip or pin or washer I just put in doesn't fall out. Back to the bench. So here's the upper part of the bracket, and you're going to have to know that in perspective because of the way the pins fit. Now I did clean up all these areas in here. Got my little Dremel tool with that little stainless steel brush on it. They also have brass, but stainless steel. Cleaned it up as best I could. You could use some light grade sandpaper, small file. Got all these areas in here where the hardware is going to be. Let's get into the light. Maybe that's a little better. Down a little bit, Tom. There we go. Maybe zoom in. There we go. So, got all those grooves. Now, again, remember, this will be fitting on the car this way. Here's my rotor. Going to be inside here. This will be top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it around and do it like this so that I can put my boots back in. So I'll just kind of wedge this in the vise. For filming purposes, it will be easier to see. Alrighty. Let's see. Maybe up a little more. There we go. Let's zoom in. Alright, so here's the first little boot right here. I'll do the upper one first. I cleaned all that out. Whoops, camera slipping. Camera guy. Alright. Because there was so much stuff in there, old grease and stuff too, I also had put some brake clean in there and let it soak for a couple days. Now you can get these little brushes. There's a great set of little brushes, engine cleaning brushes and stuff like that at Harbor Freight that you could get down in there and really get in there and clean it. But you know, I just went ahead and did the soak for a couple days. So it's all clean. Now the boot, again, you have a groove, a little bit different on the pin. Find the pin. It's the one with the flat sides on it. Is going to have the larger part of the groove here, I believe. So, give me a second, let's get some perspective. Alright, let's see if I face that up. Now, you see the difference? Very deep groove there, not so deep there. That deep part is going to fit in the actual caliper bracket itself. So I'm going to lube it up. A little bit there on the outside. I don't think you need to see me doing that. I'm going to very delicately push that in. And that fits in there rather nicely. You can feel it. Alright, then, since this is the upper one, this is the pin that has the flat sides to it. It's going to go to the top. Now for that one it said use the orange lube, or I've got the purple ceramic stuff and purple Permatex. At the same time I'm going to smear it on here. I also have these long Q-tips, and I'm going to put some in the actual cylinder, like so. Get a good bead on things there. Alright, and I've got this all nicely lubed up. Maybe a tiny bit more. Don't want to overdo it. Okay, so there we go. We'll very gently push that in there. A little twisting motion. And that boot will slide up on there nicely. Push it down. Ooh, that's good. That bounces nicely. Okay, so that's one. Can you see the rear one? Go up a little. Again, one-man show, like I always say. Alright, so we have that lower pin. We will put a little grease on that pin. Actually, get a little. Okay, this is the stuff, the orange, that came in the kit with it. Turn the light so you can see. A little bit of extra. Okay, that pin is ready. Put the red on the boot. Remembering your perspective. Alright, nice seal there. Take a little bit of that orange. Of course, I dropped the package. And what I do with my Q-tip. Hold on a moment. Well, darn. Alright, so got plenty of extra Q-tips. There we go. Put some of that in that cylinder. Alright, so now that pin is ready. Get it centered. Got a nice fit there. And get the boot over the pin. Yeah, got the air out of it, a little bit of air. And so, looks pretty good. I'm positively sure. Alright, so we have pretty good spring. It's sitting up a little bit. Let's push some of that air out. Alrighty. Alright, so I'll even that up a little bit. Let me work on now putting the hardware in. Now, in these kits, this particular model did not have it. There are these pad return springs. I'm using these, well, when I took them off, they did not have these pad return springs, and so the kit just came with these in case you do. I'm using these Wagner thermal quiets. As a matter of fact, they don't require shims, they say. I called them and said, no, we don't need the shims. Alright, so again, I use the Permatex Ceramic Extreme Brake Parts Lubricant. Kind of pricey, but it's good stuff. So those areas that I had cleaned, I'm going to apply some of that. You can see here, I got the air out of this particular piston. It was sticking up a little bit. So I'm going to, see, that's where the hardware is going to go. It's down here. Doesn't have to be glopped on, just enough to make a thin coating. More is not necessarily better. It just attracts grease and dirt. A little bit there, a little bit there. Make sure you get the groove. Again, a thin coating. A little much there. Okay. Now, take this piece of hardware here. Show you that up close. I'm going to fit the post. This part of the, this part here will actually go toward the pad. I'm going to snap it in as best I can. It has a little bit of a grip to it. Okay. So. Alright, so that's one. Then I'm going to do the other. There. Put this piece in. It has little tangs on it, so it will actually just fit right down in there. Sometimes it requires just a little bit of persuasion. Okay, everything's properly seated. Feel it. You got to really get some good finger strength in there. Okay, now those are the guides for your actual pads. Now I'm going to put a little more in those guides there. When I took the old ones off, man, they were stuck. Had to knock them out with a hammer. So a little bit here. I will also coat the ears of the actual pads, when I get ready to put them in, I'll do these edges here too. And where the piston's going to go and where it's going to mount up against the actual bracket on the outside, I'll put it here. Now again, these are Wagner thermoquiets, and they said no, we don't use shims, just put the grease on and put them in. Alright, let's go back to the car. Okay, you know, I may be able to get these bracket bolts on with my air impact. What I didn't have until yesterday, I did not have the smaller of the sockets that are flexible. So I just happened to go by old Harbor Freight. I mean, that's what I call my sacrificial tools. If I tried to use a regular straight, deep, or small socket, it wouldn't fit. But I went and got these 1/2-inch drives, and lo and behold, I think it's going to fit on that bottom part. Because, like I said, the other sockets don't fit on this bolt down here, so and unless you use a regular box-end wrench, you'd have to take this apart, take that apart, lift it up. Oh, to heck with it. So here is my, now this is my Nano, I like this, my Astro Nano 1/2-inch impact wrench from Astro Pneumatics. It's the model 1822. Now it is a 1/2-inch drive. They also have a 3/8-inch drive, and the problem I had was a couple months ago, I was all excited, went to Harbor Freight, got the adjustable sockets, excuse the hunting in the background, and got it home and realized it's a 3/8-inch drive. Well, I've got a 1/2-inch drive. So yesterday I decided to use my 20% off coupon and get a set of these for like 30 bucks minus 20%. Now, it does not have the power of my Ingersoll Rand, which is like 600 foot-pounds. I think this might go up to 400. So I'm going to give it a shot here and see if this doesn't work. Oh, also, Astro's come out with another 1/2-inch Nano that has like 600 foot-pounds now, but it won't work for me. And the reason being is I have your standard little compressor, maybe 150 psi, 20 gallon. And it only cranks up about 5.5 cubic feet per minute, which is an average for most of these tools. Well, this one requires about 9.5 when I did the research. So it's not going to work for me. It'd be underpowered unless I had a much larger compressor. Now, like my son, who works at Cary Mower and Saw in Cary, North Carolina, it would work for him because they have an entire shop type of compressor, a large one. So 9.5 cubic feet to them is nothing. But for me, the average DIYer, it would actually be underpowered. But I'm going to give this a shot. Pardon me while I grunt and groan here. I was incorrect. It's the upper one that's the hard part, and it is still not going to work. Just that much. Missed it by that much. Yeah. That control arm bolt, or actually that one bolt right up at the top here that holds the ball joint in, just not there. So, back to square one. It was a nice try. And you do lose a little bit of torque with these, much like you do with the extension. You don't get the true torque. So if I'm not mistaken, this was somewhere around 78 foot-pounds. This is where I'm going to take my wrench and I'm going to just average it out. Since you can't get a real torque wrench in there. but it ain't going anywhere. Alright, now I'm going to get the torque wrench and come back and do the lower one. Upon double checking, 80 foot-pounds, so close enough. Now here's the reason to get things jacked up as high as possible, trying to get a torque wrench under here. Like I said, it's a lot easier on a lift. Okay, right there at 80. All right, next, I believe we'll work on the pads. All right, we'll start with that inboard pad. Remember, the wear indicator is going to go up, and it's going to go inboard. Put a little bit of the purple stuff on it. Not a lot, just like I say, enough to do a thin coating. And a little bit on the back there for where the piston's going to go. Remember this tab, because when you put the caliper on, it's going to have to go in one of those grooves. Austin Powers would say, groovy, baby, groovy. All right, try and keep your grease on the caliper, not on the brake pad. So now comes the fun part, is you've got to get it in the grooves. Oops, pretty much had to get on my head for this again. Okay, after a little bit of a struggle, now I'm going to put a little more grease, excuse me, where the piston goes. Now any grease that I have on the actual rotor, at the very end, I'll end up spraying it down with more brake clean anyway. Alright, let me go grab the front one. I'll go right back for that. Oh, wait a minute. I have it right here. Okay, this is easier. Now I can see it better. Alright, we'll grease a tiny bit. So just the ears. Okay. A little bit there. And where it just touches the actual bracket. Okay. I'm going to slip it in. You have to work around the bracket a little bit. That stays there. And push it down a little. Oops. Now I had it. don't know why I'm all fumble-fingered today. And that's because I'm on camera. Okay. Get that ear in. That ear in. Alright. There we go. Now I'm going to go clean up my hands and we'll work on putting the caliper on. This part's really hard to film, so I'll have to do it and show you the end result. Again, this is when you need to lift and you have the camera up underneath. Don't forget to attach your parking brake. Got to align that pin, or the boss, some people call it, into the groove. Slide this on. Alright, so I'm going to have to backtrack just a little bit, go get my tool and turn that piston in maybe another quarter to a half turn. That's when you need an assistant. And your tools. Let's try it again. So I turned it in another quarter turn. Try not to puncture myself. I don't think these guys are good shots, you know, rapid fire. All right, let's see. You can see it. Yeah, that's better. All right. Oh, that quarter turn made all the difference. Brake line out of the way. So now I'll take a peek from the top here. Okay. You got to push your pins in a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that's a good fit. I'm going to go get my bolts, hand thread those in, little fluid film. Takes just a second there. Turn the light back up here where I can see. Adjust accordingly. There's one. Already. Get number two. Didn't really have to clean these bolts off. They weren't very corroded. So I didn't have to take the wire brush to them. Alright, I'm going to tighten this up. I'll stop the film for a second and I'll be right back. Oh, don't forget that in order to tighten these up so the boots don't spin, right in here is that one bolt that's a 17 millimeter and this is a 12. So you've got to hold it in place so it doesn't spin. And I just take the box end wrench, tighten it up, tighten them evenly. You don't want things cockeyed. So I'll get this one tightened, and I'll do the bottom one. Then I'll torque it down. Right off the top of my head, don't remember the torque spec, but that's okay. I got the book. This job doesn't take you too long, really, if you have the right tools and everything that you need, but filming it does. Alright, so that one's good. Almost there. Okay. And go underneath. Again, on your head. I hope you don't get dizzy. And don't forget your brake cable has to fit in the groove. And there's a bolt back there. I'll show you that once I get it all pieced back together there. Don't cross thread anything. If it doesn't seem to go in right, back it off. Try again. The old adage, torque it down until it strips and back it off a half turn. No sirree, Bob. Not on brakes. So again, this is a, whoops, it's a 12 for the bolt and a 17 millimeter holding it. Gosh, I work primarily on the imports. So I only have one American-made car, and that's my Ranger. Everything's pretty much metric. Okay, let me get my torque wrench and answer that text. If you can hear the beedo in the background. There are two different torque settings based on whether or not you have the Nissin or Akebono. I know I have the Nissin type of caliper bracket and calipers because it is stamped into the metal. So the guide pins are at 37 foot-pounds. If you have the Akebono, it's like 25. Akebono seems to be thinner. Their rotors are thinner too, and so the torque specs are a little bit less. But in this case, it's going to be 37. Don't forget your 17 millimeter. Make sure you always grab the end of your torque wrench. Don't hold it here, hold it at the end. And again, I'm compromised, so do the best I can. Alright, switch hands. Here we go. On the bolt, this way. There we go. There's the first one. Yep. Wow, this is tight. $37. turns. So, that one's good. Alright, now I'm going to go back and do the bolt that holds the emergency brake cable. And I'll have to take the camera off and show you how that hooks up. Alright, this might be a little cockeyed here. Let's do it this way. Alright, so I tightened up the bolt here. Now, you're looking, this is again the passenger side. I'm looking front to rear. You know, here's your rotor and stuff here. This is the emergency brake cable here, and it has a sleeve on it that slips over, and the cable pull through, and you secure it here. That was, I didn't torque that, just tighten it. It might be 10 or 12 foot-pounds at best. And then at this time I just loosened up the brake hose bolt here, but I did not take it off. It was not necessary. So again, that's a 12mm bolt on this back side here, and I just tightened it up, hand tighten. So now what I have left is the banjo bolt. So let me go back around, and I know that's 26 foot-pounds. The banjo bolt will go that there. Get nice and close. You see my finger. The banjo bolt. Hard to get perspective here. It's going to be right there. Now there'll be a washer, bolt, 2 washers, and the actual line. So it'll be a slide the bolt through, washer, and a washer. So it'll be from the top down, bolt, washer, through the brake line, washer, and tighten it up. So here's that banjo bolt, and you say, what makes it so special? Well, as you can see, there's a hole there, and there's a hole here, and when you put it in that fitting looks like a banjo. So remember, top down, I'll put a washer through the fitting, then another washer, and screw it in. Can we see that? I think so. Remember, I do have the actual brake line clamped. Okay, so it will be, maybe I can get a good close-up of that. There we go. So you see, banjo fitting. It's got a post here which will go into a hole here. That's the way it doesn't twist and turn. So there. Put that in there. Careful not to strip anything. All right. Okay. Alright, I believe that was a 12 too. Of course, what did I do? There we go. No, that was more to 14. That's okay. So, let me go get my torque wrench and put a 14 on it. Alright. There's a 14, I was correct. 26 foot-pounds. Everything's in place. These are like crush washers. And there we go. Alright, now, I'm just about done. I now have to bleed. Now remember, there's only air from maybe this point down. So what I'm going to do is connect my little vacuum, my Mighty Vac vacuum, and bleed from this point down. But I need to make sure that my reservoir, brake fluid reservoir, the cap is off and I have enough in there so I don't pull air into the system. If I'm not mistaken, that was a 10 millimeter bleeder screw. Let's double check that. Yes, I am correct. Alright, so let me do those things. Let's see if we can bleed this thing. Now, on 2 of these 4, I have forgotten. Unclamp your line. Alright. Otherwise you're going to sit there and look silly, which is easy enough to do for me. Alright, so got my little canister hooked up, got my pump here, brake bleeder line's ready to go. I'm going to pump it up a little bit, get myself a little vacuum, open it, drain the vacuum a little bit, close it, pump it up, open it up, close it. Now I'm pulling stuff from the reservoir, .3 brake fluid in this case. Don't spill it on the paint. If you do, get it off. It will eat through paint. Brake fluid is caustic. It's going to take a little work. Got to fill up that chamber where the piston is. Gee, sounds like a machine gun in the background, doesn't it? If you have a second person, it is easier for somebody to be pushing on the brake pedal. But I do not have that today. Sometimes I get lucky. You know, there are vacuum systems, pressure systems. I don't do enough of these to buy high-end equipment. There we go. About time. Okay. Pressure. It is going to look a little bubbly. So what I do is usually an ounce or 2 at least, and it still looks bubbly. And old mechanics trick. Reason it gets bubbly, you think, oh gosh, there's still air in the system. There's still air in the system. It'll drive you batty. Well, what happens is there's air leakage around those threads. So again, I love YouTube. Old mechanics trick is, you know, you take the bleeder screw, put some grease around it, and put it back in, and that helps seal it. But in this case, I'm not worried. I'm not bleeding an entire system. Again, I will put at least an ounce. And my fluid's pretty clear. It's a nice green. Okay, I'm going to leave it open and just pump. Okay. Make sure the level and the reservoir up front doesn't drop, or you'll be bleeding the entire system. Yeah, so I'm going to put at least an ounce or 2. Be absolutely positively certain that it gets there tomorrow. Yeah, I know, I use bad analogies. See how bubbly it's looking? that's okay. So, 30 cc's is an ounce, so I'm at about 25. If you've ever tried to find the caps for your bleeder screws, near impossible. And they're like $4 for 2. And there's so many different size nipples on these fittings that it's near impossible to get the right size. So it's like most people just leave them off. Alright, we're getting there. That's my wife getting ready to go spend money. Can you feel my pain? My daughter's already home from college this weekend, and she's already out spending money. Again, can you feel my pain? And guess who's at home working? Yeah, I got it. Dad. That's okay. It's me and the dog. Alright, I think we're good there. Snug it up. Don't have to get in there. Oops. Tear it apart. I will dispose of this accordingly. I'd wipe this off too before I started pumping that. Alright, so now I'm going to go back. I'm going to triple check, make sure I torqued everything in its proper perspective. And we should be able to finish this job up. Alright, so I'm having to do this kind of back-asswards, but I sincerely hope you can see this. Now, if you look where I'm shining my flashlight, you can see the groove. Man, it's hard to get the camera perspective there. You can see the groove in the piston. And that little, you can barely see the little notch right there. So I know it's in the proper perspective. Now what I've also done is, don't go driving off. I got in the car and I pumped the brakes to get those pistons to move out, and then I turned the engine on, pressurized the system, pumped it 10-20 times, got the system pressurized. Want to make sure I don't have any dead spots in there when you go down the road and all of a sudden you don't have any brakes. Now to set the parking brakes, after I had done the pumping to make sure the pistons, everything's where it should be in proper perspective there, I pull the handbrake up. It says 7 to 9 clicks. So I pulled it up 7 and they engaged. These things are almost automatic, really. So what I'm going to do now is probably go ahead and put the tires back on, take it for a test drive. Now with these Wagner thermoquiets, again, they don't use shims. They say to break these in, drive the car up to 30 miles per hour, and do a gentle, quick braking, 15 to 20 times. You don't want to squeal your tires when you stop, but you know, some firm pressure. Stop 15 to 20 times. That's how they break them in. Okay, so let's do a recap here. So, on this particular car, the video I've just completed was concerning the rear brakes. I have another video for the front brakes, but the rear brakes are slightly different style caliper, and it just so happens that when I took everything apart, I had a seized piston in the front and in a torn boot, which the contamination got in there and seized that piston. And then on the rear I had another torn boot, which was torn twice as badly as the front one, although it did not seize anything. So the greatest challenge was getting the piston back into the weather boot from the kit. One method was this one guy on, like I say, on YouTube had actually, lubed up his fingers and got the piston in there and tried to catch one corner, then squeeze it around. That can be done, but it is difficult, and he does say that it requires some finger strength. Another methodology is the one that I used. Another methodology is to make take the spray can cap, cut it down, make a bit of a piston sleeve. I did not attempt that. I just went ahead and used the wires. You could do it that way. And another method that most mechanics do is when they take the caliper off, where the banjo bolt and the brake fluid goes, you take your compressed air, and most of these mechanisms, the actually end of the compressed air hose, you know, has a regulator, and it must have some kind of a rubber tip on the end, otherwise you can't get a good seal. That's also another way to get those pistons out, but be mindful of your fingers. They'll take the caliper off, they'll have that hole, put some rags or maybe a 2x4 small piece of wood between the piston and the bracket, take compressed air and pop it out. Again, mind your fingers. It will definitely put a hurting on you. So, like I say, in an opposite fashion, you put the piston in, get it down around the boot, inflate the boot, and try and wiggle it in. Most mechanics do it that way. I didn't attempt that. I think my wire method was working pretty well. So all 4 brakes, and also had made another video too. There was a leak in that solenoid for the variable timing. That's a separate video. Bad O-ring. Look for that. So I've taken it out for a spin. Oh, the tires. You know, I had tightened them up before I took them off the jack stands, and then once I got it on the ground, it's 80 foot-pounds of torque on each of the lug nuts. So that was taken care of. I've driven it, test drive, broken the brakes, 17, 18 times per the recommendations of the guys at Wagner. And so I'm going to return it to my son. I even cleaned the windows for him. So, I hope this helps. Again, I didn't find many videos and some of the stuff that I did, and maybe I can, you know, pay it forward for a change. And please remember my credo. I'll fix your car, but it won't go far. Until next time.